another Facebook Live. I hope you guys had a really good holiday. I know that the holidays can sometimes be rough. I do Facebook Lives once a month in this group, and I share it with other people as well outside of this group, so you should be aware of that. And today we're going to talk about reassurance, because reassurance is something that most of us have to deal with if you have a child with anxiety or OCD. Reassurance is a key behavior that most of us struggle with. So I thought it'd be a really good topic because people don't know what to do with that. So we're going to dive deep into reassurance, and I'm going to talk about it for anxiety and OCD. So I'm going to try to talk about both of those issues so that everybody can get some help, because they do look different. And a lot of people have kids with anxiety and OCD, just anxiety, just OCD, well, not so much just OCD. So I'm going to try to weave them together. But if you're just joining us and you don't know who I am, my name is Natasha Daniels. I'm a child therapist. I am the admin to this private Facebook group, Parenting Anxious Kids. Forgot the name of the group for a second. And my goal is to help parents who are raising kids with anxiety and OCD find some sanity and develop tools to help their kids at home. So every month I do a Facebook Live, and I pick a topic that I think would be relevant and try to give you kind of like a mini Facebook class to help you and your kids. So I am going to get into talking about reassurance. Just want to make sure that we're in here and that you guys can hear me. I ran to work and grabbed my laptop and forgot my microphone. So if you can hear me, hit like, and so I know that I am here and I'm loud and proud, because I would hate to record this entire thing and then find out that nobody could hear me. So also, you can tell me, how was your holiday? Was it good? Did you survive? Give me a heart if you had a really nice holiday, if you had a really nice Christmas or whatever you celebrate, and hopefully it survived. All right, so it looks like you can hear me, which is good. So I want to dive into talking. Oh, I'm glad somebody had a really good holiday. If you have questions as I go, sometimes they're delayed, so just be aware of that. Sometimes people will put comments in and I think no one's asking any questions, and then I go back and I see all these questions. So if I missed your question, just know that that is what is going on. It looks like a lot of people had a good holiday, and I'm glad. I try to throw out some resources for you on how to survive the holidays and be proactive. So I hope that helped a little bit. So leave questions as we go, because I do want this to be somewhat interactive if I can, and I've gotten better at multitasking. So I will see, hopefully, if you have questions, and I'll try to answer them. Let's get into it. So reassurance looks a little bit different for kids with anxiety and OCD. And if you're a typical parent raising a typical child, you're not going to see the big deal with reassurance. In fact, reassurance is a very good thing. It's something that we do parentally, right? Like, we want to help our kids and we want to give them the reassurance. Don't worry, you're fine. Don't worry, it's going to be okay. Now, the hard part about that is that when it's anxiety, or OCD especially too, reassurance is not a good thing. You're like, what? Why isn't reassurance a good thing? For anxiety, you have to do it in a very specific way. And for OCD, reassurance is disguising an actual compulsion. So I want to get into both of those. And if you have questions as I go, let me know. So reassurance looks a little bit different when you have a child with anxiety and OCD. And I'm going to break it down into anxiety and then OCD. So when you have a child who has anxiety and they're asking for reassurance all the time, the reason why reassurance isn't good, and we are going to get into how to eliminate reassurance in a slow way, because just taking away reassurance, just leaving this Facebook Live and being like, oh shoot, Natasha said reassurance isn't good, so I'm going to just stop doing it. That wouldn't be a really good thing, because it was developed over time, your child's depending on it, and we have to slowly back off. So at the end of this training, I'll go into like some approaches on how you slowly move back, because I don't want anyone to go do radical stuff and then not give their kids reassurance and their child's like, what? And they don't have any of the tools and skills to learn how to cope. So when you have anxiety and you're reassuring, you're not giving your child the tools to reassure themselves. So we're providing, like we're spoon feeding them uplifting, reassuring things. But what we're actually doing is we're kind of like not allowing their brain to develop organically natural thoughts to get out of their own head. So, and also it doesn't stick as well. When you tell a child, I like examples, right? So if I have a child who is afraid to talk to someone and I say to them, it always goes well, you're going to be fine, don't worry about it, I'm sure that they're not even thinking about you. Or let's say you have a child who doesn't feel well and you say, you always think that you're sick, but you're not sick, you're okay, it's just your anxiety. Or your child is afraid they're going to throw up. Don't worry, you're not going to throw up, you never throw up, you're going to be okay. We're not allowing our child to come up with those thoughts, and you're not always going to be right there. So we really want to talk in a way that's not going to be intuitive. It's going to feel really awkward, and we'll get into how you do that in a second, to build those skills. Intuitively, I know with my own anxious kids, I just want to swoop in and give them the words that I know are going to fix it. And I'm sure you probably feel that way too. You're like, if I just tell them they're okay, then we're good to go and they can go on with their day, which is true for most kids with anxiety. I'm going to talk about OCD in a second. That is true. They do feel better in that moment, but long-term, you're not helping, because long-term, they're not developing any skills and they're going to continually be dependent on you for those uplifting words and those words of encouragement. And in fact, sometimes they develop a secondary issue of separation anxiety because they're so dependent on you to pull them out of that quicksand. Does that make sense? Okay, so I want to talk about how reassurance looks for OCD. And I know I'm trying to bridge two different topics at one time, because a lot of you are dealing with both. So with OCD, reassurance is completely different, because for OCD, you're actually completing their OCD loop. And so I always tell parents, you're the sink. So think about it that way. If I am a child and I'm worried, my hands are dirty, I go to the sink, I wash it off, and I feel better for a second, but that was a compulsion. And now I feel the itch and the urge to do it again, and do it again, and do it again, right? You're the sink. So a lot of times with children, the compulsion is the reassurance and the checking with you. And you complete that OCD loop. You wash their worries away with your words. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm sure a lot of you who have listened to me a long time know that already, because I talk about that a lot. And so you don't want to be the sink, because the whole goal of OCD is to move them away from doing compulsions. And the first layer is having us as parents not be part of their compulsion, because that's the easiest part actually to pull back on, because we can control ourselves a lot more than we can control our kids and what they do. So how do you tell the difference? Some of you might be saying, okay, I get that, but my kid has anxiety and OCD. So how do I know what is reassurance for anxiety, what's reassurance for OCD? Because how you approach those are going to be completely different. And a lot of times parents will say, and I'll see it even in our private Facebook group, sometimes parents will say, well, does it even matter if it's anxiety or OCD? I mean, isn't it just the same thing? No, it does matter. It does matter greatly, because how you approach a lot of these things will be completely different. And so you do want to be able to differentiate. And most of us who have kids with OCD, I would say almost all of us, our kids are anxious as well. So if you have OCD, the likelihood of you having anxiety is like 99%. Like you're going to have anxiety of some sort. If you have anxiety, you're not necessarily going to have OCD. Now you are predisposed to get OCD, so the likelihood of you getting OCD is higher, but there's plenty of people with OCD, there's plenty of people with anxiety who do not have OCD. So you want to keep an eye out when you're getting that constant reassurance. One, to make sure that your child is not developing OCD. Two, if your child has anxiety and OCD, that you're responding in a way that's helpful. Okay, so how do you tell the difference? The easiest way to tell the difference is with anxiety. First of all, they tend to be what ifs more often. Now you can have OCD that's what ifs, but anxiety tends to be more of what ifs. And when you reassure them with anxiety, there is some comfort. And so they might still keep asking you. They might ask you in different ways. They might say, but what if this happens, Mom? Okay, but what if I get sick? What will happen then? They'll have follow-up questions. They're actually having a conversation with you. There's a dialogue. and they will start to feel better. Maybe not 100% depending on your child's level of anxiety, but there's a conversation, there's follow-up questions that are relevant, and there is some comfort that they're getting from your words. That's anxiety. OCD, one, if you know your child has OCD, if they're asking you something about their OCD theme, which I talk a lot about, like in my OCD class and stuff, so that you can really know your child's OCD themes. If it's their OCD theme, your guard should be completely up, where you're kind of like, well, that's a question about your OCD, so that's interesting. I got a question from Marilyn. I want to pause really quick. So my 5-year-old daughter is very sensitive to the seams in the socks and needs to wear certain clothes. I'm researching and feel she has HSP, but don't know where to start. Okay. That's really not what I'm talking about right now. So I'll answer your question after I get off Facebook Live, because that's probably more of a sensory issue, is my guess. And I have tons of sensory topics and sensory resources that we can get into to help with that. So I want to go back quickly to what I was talking about with the OCD. So if you know it's their theme, right? And so not sensory wise, but they're asking about, hey mom, yesterday I think that maybe I said a bad word. I'm not sure, but I think I said a bad word. Okay, well, you have moral OCD. You worry about being a good person. That seems like an OCD theme. Secondly, there's no reprieve. So they don't feel better when you answer. That's a big clue that it's OCD. When they're asking you, and they're asking you over and over again, they tend to ask in a very similar way. Their question is very static. It's like the same question. But am I a good person? But am I a good person? Or would I do that? Would I do that? And no matter what you answer, there's no relief coming from them. And then sometimes they want you to answer in a very specific way. So they want you to answer. And if you give them an answer, they might say, no, can you say it this way? Or can you just say yes? Or can you just say yes? Okay, now we're dealing with OCD. So hopefully you get the difference between anxiety and OCD. If you have a question about that, feel free to post it. I think I can actually see your comments, which is awesome. I think. Oh, wait, Marilyn, comment on. I just don't know if it was OCD related. I actually have a good podcast on that about just perfect OCD, sensory processing, and perfectionism. And it does touch on that. Like, how do you tell the difference between just right OCD, which can look like sensory, like my socks just don't feel right, they just don't feel right, and when it's pure sensory. So I will link that for you, Marilyn, for sure, when I get off. Okay, so now we know is it OCD or not OCD, if we know it's anxiety. Let's talk about why it's not helpful. So I already talked about why it's not helpful for anxiety. We're not teaching them. In my online classes, I talk about red thoughts and green thoughts. Red thoughts are bad thoughts and green thoughts are kind of the reframing of the cognitive distortion. We want our kids to learn how to do that for themselves. So we're like robbing them of that opportunity if we spoon feed them the green thoughts. For OCD, we're growing the OCD. The more you become the OCD loop and you complete it, the more the OCD grows. Now, I know that can be alarming for some people, and so they're kind of like, yikes, I'm not doing this. Like, tomorrow I'm stopping. That's not helpful too. And we'll go into like how you have to slowly do it. Okay, Kathy said, my son has issues with food labels and whether food is safe related to food poisoning 3 years ago. Do you think EMDR treatment will help and then begin treatment for OCD? Okay, so food poisoning was kind of a trauma. So you could try EMDR. EMDR can be very effective for trauma, but it has to be a very specific trauma-based situation, in my opinion. Otherwise, I don't see EMDR working for OCD. It's great for trauma. A lot of times, OCD is triggered by some event, but lots of us get food poisoning and we don't develop OCD. So a lot of times parents will tell me they can link a situation to their OCD. They'll say, you know what, on November 10th, they woke up and they got really sick, and ever since then, they've been afraid of throwing up and they have emetophobia. Well, you know what, a lot of people wake up and throw up and they don't develop emetophobia. So I would just be really careful about that if it was truly a trauma, or if your child was predisposed to get OCD and then they have OCD. Definitely look for an OCD therapist. I think there are great modalities out there. I think play therapy, biofeedback, mindfulness, these are all wonderful therapies. But when you talk about OCD and even anxiety, you really can only, like, research evidence approaches are very narrow, and they're really just ERP, exposure response prevention, which is a branch of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I'm just a big proponent of doing that for any kid who has anxiety or OCD, because that is the most effective. For OCD, you really should just be doing ERP. Don't waste your time in other things, because you're going to be spinning your wheels and you're not going to be getting a lot of traction. Okay, so moving on, I want to talk about what to do for the next 15 minutes before we go. So for anxiety, for starters, let me just back up. You want to partner with your child. Anything I ever tell parents to do is with your kids, not to your kids. Because and I say this a lot, so if you hear me talking a lot, you're going to hear me say this. We are in the passenger seat as parents, and they are in the driver's seat. So if you're in the driver's seat doing all the work, and your child is just on, like, in it for the ride, we've got it backwards. And so that's super hard. I know for me with my anxious kids, it is so hard for me to be passive and let them discover their own tools in their own time. And sometimes it's so slow, and I'm so frustrated and feel like a failure as a mom and a therapist, because my kids are just not progressing at the pace that I want them to progress. But the I is the problem. It's not me. It's their journey. It's not my journey. So we want to respect that. We want to take their own pace. And so we want to partner with them, and we want to say, look, let's do anxiety first, and then I'll do OCD. I want to make sure I'm answering any questions that I see coming as well. Sue said, my 8-year-old daughter asks the same questions in the same order every night before bed. Mommy, can I call you if I don't feel well? If I don't answer, she has a meltdown. I tried your turnaround and say, what will happen if you don't call me? Trying her to problem solve, but she still wants me to answer. Feels like OCD. Yes, Sue, can't diagnose here, but sounds like OCD to me. OCD is not satiated or okay with your explanation because it's not rational. And so we're going to go into how to handle OCD in a second. So, and you know what, we can talk about this in generalities. For anxiety or OCD, you say to your child, look, whenever well, let's just do anxiety first, because it is different language. For anxiety, I would say, when I give you reassurance, I'm not teaching you how to think for yourself. And you really have to start thinking about your red thoughts and your green thoughts. I just use that language because I think it's simple and it gives them a visual. So I'm going to prompt you to think about your own green thoughts, because me just telling you you're fine, that's not helpful. And side note on that, I don't really want to tell kids they're fine. I want to get them to be able to accept the worst case scenario for most fears. Now, if they're afraid of, like, death, dying, and someone killing them, I don't want to be like, well, what's the worst part about someone killing you? I mean, is it really that bad? No. But if it's throwing up, I'm going to actually say, what's the worst part about throwing up? You know, and then they might say, well, everyone's going to laugh at me. Well, you know, if they laugh at you, are they your good friend? So I would actually want to go down that rabbit hole with them, or have the therapist go down the rabbit hole with them and try to help them with their thinking. So for anxiety, when your child does anyone have an example of an anxious thought that their child brings up a lot? And I can actually use someone's example. If not, I'll come up with something, because I've got plenty of them in my own home. But if they have an anxious thought and they say, Mom, am I going to be sick today? Mom, am I going to be sick today? You might initially, when you're developing this new plan, you might say, from now on, when you have this worry, so you're doing this when they're not worried, right? Because their brain is listening a little bit more. They're not in panic. So you'd say, from now on, when you ask me if you're going to be sick, let's talk about what can you tell yourself, right? What are your green thoughts? And so then you try to get your child to generate them before they have those episodes, or when you go to bed at night and you're scared, what can you tell yourself? And so create and help your child with those green thoughts. Generate them with them if they can't generate them themselves. And then when they're in panic, you slowly start saying something like, what are your green thoughts? What can you tell yourself? Now, I will warn you, kids don't like this. They might get mad at you. In the moment, they might be like, I don't care about green thoughts. Green thoughts are stupid. Natasha's stupid. No, maybe. And I have kid YouTube videos on green thoughts and red thoughts. I'll try to find it and link it when I get off. But it is a tightrope. And so you don't want to push them overboard. So when you see that they're getting panicky and they're getting frustrated and you're not fulfilling that that satiation of reassurance, then you say, okay, fine, here's a green thought. But then eventually you start to back off, if that makes sense. Now, when it comes to OCD, we got Sharon said, my DD asked me every night to turn off everything in fire. Oh, in case of fire. Okay. So that sounds like OCD. Not to diagnose Sharon, but so that's an OCD thing. So that's perfect because we're going to go right into OCD. So we can use that as a good example. For OCD, it's going to be different, right? So hopefully, if you've taken my OCD online class or you've heard other things that I've talked about, I'm always big on personifying it. There's two things that I'm really big on. One, naming the OCD or the anxiety. If they're open to it, if they're not, don't force it. It's not a big deal. And also, educating them. They have to understand what anxiety is, how it works. They have to understand what OCD is and how it works. And I go into that and I talk about how you can teach them in my classes and a lot of stuff that I talk about on my YouTube videos and stuff like that. So they already should hopefully know what OCD is, because now we're going to talk about OCD for a second, and then I'll come back. So don't leave for anxiety. We're going to come back and talk about all of it together in a minute. But so I would say, let's just say that your child's OCD. All right, so my son has OCD, and his OCD name is Squishy, right? And so I'll give you an example. Well, we'll use Sharon's example. We don't have to use my son. So you might say, and Sharon, I don't know if your child has a name for their OCD or their anxiety, but that could be helpful too. So we'll just call it Squishy. Who calls anything Squishy? But my son does. So we'll just use Squishy as an example. So you would say, you know, and actually Sharon, with yours, she's actually having you do something. So that's not really reassurance. That's like literally she's having you do the compulsion for her. So I'm not going to actually use your example just because that's an act. Although you can do something very similar in how I'm going to talk about this. So let's say your child says, a common one with moral OCD is they're saying they're sorry and they want you to accept their apology. Do some of you have that? That's a very big one, right? So your child might say, Mom, I'm sorry that I called you, I don't know, I'm just trying to make this up. Let me think. I'm sorry that I spilled that. And you say, it's okay. Well, no, that would be reassurance already. It's hard to come up with an example on the fly. Mom, I'm sorry I called you a bad name. I think I called you a bad name in my head. Okay, that's a moral OCD reassurance. I'm sorry, Mom. And maybe you say to your child, you know what, from now on, when you say I'm sorry and I say it's okay, I'm giving Squishy a high five. I'm growing your OCD. And so it's a compulsion. And hopefully your child knows this language, because that's really the beginning part, is your child has to know how OCD works. So Squishy, we'll just use it as Squishy. Squishy wants me to say it's okay, and then Squishy grows bigger. So every time you say I'm sorry, and I say it's okay, don't worry about it, I just high five Squishy and I grow him bigger. So from now on, what can we do about that? Here are some suggestions. And you're talking to your kid, right? And then you can say, I don't want to grow your OCD bigger. And so I feel like a bad mom when I say it's okay, even though I know you in the moment are feeling really nervous and you want that reassurance. I feel like I'm a bad mom because I'm growing your OCD and I don't want to do that. So from now on, is it okay if I just say, I don't want to talk to Squishy, or that's Squishy, or tell Squishy to leave you alone? So you want to partner with your child. Now your child may say no, and then you have to work on motivation, education, and you don't move on until you get the education and motivation. Or if you're stagnant, and that's a totally another Facebook Live that maybe I'll do some other time, we'll do other things around that. But let's just say your child's like, okay, Mom. So in the moment that they're not panicking, they're on board. Or you might tell them, you know, from now on, when you say I'm sorry, I'm going to just say I'm not talking to Squishy because I love you and I don't want to grow your OCD. So then your child, you know, forgets this conversation, and in the moment they're like, Mom, oh, I'm sorry, I think I just called you a bad name in my head. And you say, tell Squishy to leave you alone. I like that one the best because you're almost like, you're like supporting your child. So it doesn't seem as cruel or difficult to do as a parent when you're just like, tell Squishy to leave you alone, or I wish Squishy would leave you alone. So Elizabeth said, my daughter apologizes for everything. Is that actually OCD? I can't diagnose here because that would be not okay. I don't know your daughter, Elizabeth, but apologizing excessively, you want to look at what those patterns and themes are, because that can very much be an OCD behavior especially if they want you to accept the apology and they can't handle it. So I see I'm sorry's as one of the biggest compulsions in OCD with the kids I work with. So that gives you some idea. And what you want to do is down the road, you want to partner with your child and check in and say, okay, we've been doing this for a while and I've been saying, I hope Squishy leaves you alone, or that Squishy, from now on, I'm just not going to talk to Squishy at all. So you can progress with this depending on how your child takes it. So if you have questions, we have about 5 minutes left. If you have questions specific to what I'm saying, please leave them in the comments and hopefully I will see them as they come and it won't be too delayed. And while I'm waiting for questions, I want to let you know about some things that are happening in my world. If you are enjoying these Facebook Lives, I kind of call them mini classes. I do them once a month in this group. And I am going to be opening up a community, and it's going to be something totally different. So I have kind of been inspired to just help the online community of you guys. I feel like there's not enough people who have resources, ongoing resources and support from people who really get anxiety and OCD. Some people can't even find therapists who really get this stuff. So I am going to be shifting from my private practice to more supporting you guys on a national and global level. And by doing that, I'm going to create the AT parenting community. So it is going to be this community. It's going to have its own website, its own private Facebook group. And I'm going to be doing live group coaching calls. I'm going to be doing support group calls. And I'm also going to be doing weekly classes like this in this private Facebook group. So you can learn more information about that in the comments, actually not in the comments, but in the thread. I put a link to atparentingcommunity.com. I'm opening it on January 23rd. And so I am pretty excited about that because I think it will be really helpful to everybody. And I'm not seeing any other questions. If you have questions about anything, feel free. I am going to be back in a few weeks. The reason why I didn't do this at the end of December was because of the holidays. And so I will be back at the end of January so that we can get back on track. So it's always the last Wednesday of every month. I do Facebook Lives in this group. That will continue. I will continue to be in this Facebook group, but I am going to be also developing AT Parenting Community, and I will be in there much more in depth. And I'll be doing group coaching calls and Facebook Live classes every single week, just like this. And so you can get both. So I hope that helps. I hope you find that helpful. And I hope you guys have an awesome day. And I will see you back in a few weeks. So the last week of January, on that Wednesday in the morning, I will be here. If you have ideas on topics that you want me to cover that I didn't cover, please leave a link, not a link, why did I say that? Please leave a comment in the thread here, and I will look at that because I would love to get ideas from you guys. I get ideas from you on what to do every month. All right, have a great day, and I will talk to you in a few weeks. Bye.
When I first discovered Natasha, I was in a desperate place with my son, and his anxiety was getting worse, and we had tried counseling, and it was not going well.
We were told at that point, we can't help your son. Early intervention is great. He's too young.
Parenting a child with anxiety is not easy, and sometimes it feels hopeless.
First time we took her to a therapist, who then dismissed her after about a year and a half, putting it down to bad parenting.
But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if you could join a community with parents in the same boat, with kids with similar struggles and issues? What if you could have access to resources that will help you with behavior and sleep and avoidance and opposition and fears? What if you can have somebody walk with you on your journey? Someone with clinical expertise and parental knowledge. Hi, my name is Natasha Daniels, and I'm a child therapist and a mom to 3 kids. And I've dedicated my life and my career to helping kids with anxiety and OCD, including my own. And now I want to help you too. I have created the AT Parenting Community to do just that. When you join as a member of the community, not only will you get access to resources that will help you with your child's struggles and help your family reduce the chaos in their home, you're going to be joining a community of parents just like you, with knowledge, love, and support to give. You will get access to online classes that will help your child and your child's struggles. You'll also get bonus videos and podcast material made just for members. And I've got your kids covered too. You'll have access to a library full of worksheets and videos specially designed for your kids by myself and other therapists. But that's not the best part. You're going to be getting direct attention from me, and I will be giving you support in many different ways. I'll be doing Facebook Lives every single week in our private Facebook group, where members can go to talk and get support. I'll also be doing office hours in our private Facebook group. So once a week, you can ask me whatever you want. I'll be available for an hour to answer your direct questions. But if you need a little bit more support, I've got you covered too, because I will be doing coaching calls for those that need it twice a month. And for those that need even more support, I'll be doing once a month support group calls. And I'll be doing a member spotlight call. So I'll be picking one member every month, and I'll be walking them through the process of helping their children. And you'll have access to the replay and to that phone call as well. Raising a child with anxiety or OCD is hard, but together we can get through it.
Natasha gave us practical tools. She wasn't like the books that we had read.
If you have a child with anxiety or OCD, she is your go-to woman.
Natasha had practical real-life advice that we started implementing the day that we listened to them.
In a desperate time in my journey with my son, she has been a lifesaver. Her resources have given me hope, they've given me tools and support, and they're some of the best resources you can find out there for anxiety and OCD.